Last year, following the announcement that Pokemon Sword and Shield would contain only a limited number of Pokemon, I released a video discussing the negative impact this had on the games and the shoddy business practices that led the developers and publisher to choose to go down this road. I was surprised by how well received it was. It got around 6,000 views in the first week, which kind of blew my mind because this was something I mostly just made because I was out of work at the time and didn't have anything better to do. But one sentiment kept coming up in the comments: that Nintendo wasn't responsible for this decision and that the fault lay squarely on Game Freak's shoulders or on the Pokemon companies. That Nintendo actually cares about its customers, and that none of this was their fault. Now, setting aside the nature of the relationship between Game Freak, Nintendo, Creatures Inc., and the Pokemon Company, and Nintendo's actual degree of involvement in the Pokemon franchise, I've kind of been stewing on these responses ever since. Because, of course, Nintendo doesn't genuinely care about its customers. It never has. It puts on a nice face and presents itself as this friendly company, but in the end, it's no different than any other corporation in that its primary interest will always be its bottom line. And this seems obvious enough to me, as someone who's been playing Nintendo's games for my entire life and always been put off by their business practices, but it's easy to understand why others might not feel the same way. They go out of their way to present this image of themselves as a friendly company, but if you watch Nintendo closely enough, you begin to notice a trend of anti-consumer behavior, both past and present. One could go into great detail about their willingness to license their intellectual property to mobile games with predatory monetization tactics, or their design decisions that deliberately lock basic quality of life features like Ethernet connections and chargers behind additional purchases, or their repeated failure to address major design flaws in the Switch's Joy-Con controllers that have led to several lawsuits, or the dangerous crunch practices from their past. And I think it's important to examine this behavior and to call it out for what it is. I mean, for God's sake, people actually praised Masahiro Sakurai for working through illness with an IV drip. Like, God. But this video isn't really about any of those things. They're all worth talking about, especially the fucking Sakurai thing. But what concerns me right now is their recent legal action against the Super Smash Bros. Melee community and the Big House Online. Melee is kind of an important game to me. I first played it when I was 5 years old, and it's one of my favorite games ever made, so it hurts to see its fan community be targeted by Nintendo the way it has. But first, as a disclaimer, I am not a lawyer, and nothing I say should be taken as legal advice, if that isn't obvious enough. To my knowledge, Nintendo has generally acted entirely within their legal boundaries. With that said, they're still kinda the worst. Nintendo has always had a contentious relationship with the competitive Super Smash Bros. Community. While a dedicated and enthusiastic competitive audience quickly arose after the release of Super Smash Bros. Melee in 2001, Nintendo alternatively ignored the scene or actively attempted to hinder it. In 2010, Nintendo prevented Major League Gaming from live streaming any Brawl gameplay at their MLG Orlando event. In 2013, the Melee community raised over $100,000 in donations for breast cancer research to gain entry to EVO 2013. But afterwards, Nintendo attempted once again to prevent live streaming of the event. This led to a massive outcry from fans, both competitive and casual, which eventually led to them reversing their decision. In 2015, fan-developed mod Project M ended development due to legal pressure from Nintendo. After 2015, Nintendo, quote, sponsored numerous Smash Bros. Tournaments to advertise new Nintendo products, while providing no pot bonuses typical of developer sponsorships in literally any other competitive game. Between 2015 and 2020, these sponsored tournaments often banned the use of modifications to eliminate controller discrepancies or the use of third-party controllers designed to be more ergonomic and reduce the risk of permanent injury to the hands. And on Thursday, November 19th, 2020, just 2 days before Melee's 19th anniversary, Nintendo issued a cease and desist notice to the Big House Online, the latest in a long-running series of Smash Bros. Tournaments dating back to 2011, forcing the organizers to cancel the event. The Big House has, in the past, been held in person in Michigan, but due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, was forced to go online for its 2020 iteration. Nintendo's statement on the cease and desist cited the use of a fan-developed mod for the GameCube emulator Dolphin titled Slippy. and claimed that the tournament violated their intellectual property rights by requiring the use of illegally obtained copies of Melee, and that they were given no other option but to force the tournament's cancellation. Their statement is somewhat misleading in this regard. Nintendo are not in any way forced to pursue legal action against the Big House or any other tournament series for copyright infringement. Copyright infringement isn't like trademark infringement. Your copyright doesn't go away if you fail to enforce it. Although, while many might say otherwise, it is important to note that there is little or no legal precedent protecting the usage or ownership of unlicensed digital copies of games, even if they were ripped directly from a legitimately purchased copy. I recommend checking out Hogue Law's video on the subject. And even if there were, none of that really matters. Nintendo are within their legal rights to prevent anyone from live streaming footage of any of their games at any time and for any reason, with or without justification, as is any other publisher. Unless otherwise explicitly licensed, streaming video games is generally not legally protected behavior. But while most publishers allow streaming, as it has long since become a vital part of video games marketing, Nintendo has a long history of restrictive behavior towards streamers. Until 2018, Nintendo garnished up to 40% of ad revenue from YouTube videos of gameplay from Nintendo properties. Those who refused to accept this frankly absurd grift were often subject to copyright strikes and DMCA takedown notices, regardless of fair use. And while it may have been legal for Nintendo to strong-arm creators into allowing them to skim large amounts of revenue off of the top of other people's work, that doesn't make it any less cartoonishly greedy.
Hello, I like money.
I won't make conjecture about Nintendo's sudden decision to intervene with online tournaments when they've ignored them in the past, or further motives for shutting the Big House down aside from those mentioned. But this isn't an entirely surprising development. Nintendo has a record for being extremely litigious when it comes to video game emulation and modification. They've gone to court at least 4 times over these subjects and issued numerous cease and desist notices, which directly led to the collapse of several large emulation sites like MU Paradise. And while Nintendo is, again, within their legal rights to prevent others from distributing their games, their justification for doing so is specious at best. The primary argument against copyright infringement is the damage, either real or potential, it causes to the rights holder's income from its own legitimate distribution of the product. If these games are made available for free, it can cause damage to Nintendo's income by diverting paying customers. And maybe Nintendo's constant legal threats wouldn't be so problematic if they provided any alternative to piracy. The problem, however, is that Nintendo often doesn't make these games available for purchase anywhere. While earlier consoles like the Wii had fairly large libraries of classic Nintendo games available via the Virtual Console, these offerings have slowly faded over time. The Wii's follow-up system, the Wii U, had far fewer Virtual Console games, and Nintendo's newest system, the Switch, no longer supports the Virtual Console at all. Instead, it has a library of a few dozen classic games that are not available for one-time purchases, but instead rely on the $20 per year Nintendo Online subscription service. For any games not included on this service, a paying customer has nowhere to go, save for purchasing a used copy. But the sale of used copies of video games doesn't benefit Nintendo in any way, and frankly, they'd probably try to stop it if they could get away with it. After all, they did successfully lobby to ban video game rentals in Japan, and attempted to do the same in the US. And Nintendo's failure to provide an easy method of purchasing classic games isn't a result of a genuine inability to do so. Their flagship console, the Switch, is fully capable of emulating every single video game ever released for the NES and SNES using Nintendo's own emulation software, and fans have developed powerful emulators for other systems to run on the Switch. Nintendo is fully within its power to make huge portions of their catalog of old games digitally available to consumers at any time, at little to no cost to them. Instead, in the cases where they do make these games available for purchase, they often elect to make accessibility temporary or limited. This creates what's known as artificial scarcity, wherein a product's availability is arbitrarily limited in order to maximize profits by increasing prices and encouraging impulse purchases. Nintendo is notorious for this. The NES Classic and SNES Classic were released in such small numbers that they couldn't possibly meet demand and almost immediately sold out, leading to rampant price gouging by scalpers and making it nearly impossible for legitimate customers to purchase them. And more recently, Nintendo announced the release of a collection of remastered versions of classic 3D Mario games only to reveal that they would no longer be available for purchase after March 2021, even in digital form. This serves only to encourage impulse purchases during limited periods of availability, which, frankly, is pretty reprehensible, especially right now, during a global pandemic, when many parts of the world are undergoing a major recession. And again, this sort of behavior is 100% legal. It's understandable that one might look at Nintendo's actions here and defend them, because they've committed no crime, but legality is an entirely separate matter from morality. Nintendo's actions, especially with regard to the Big House Online, are needlessly antagonistic to their audience and benefit no one, often including themselves. They've acted without any actual necessity and have provided no alternatives to players. All they've really accomplished is forcing people who love the games that they've created to stop playing them. And I think that's pretty sad, because Melee is sick as hell. Ultimately, I doubt Nintendo is going to reverse their decision about the Big House Online because of videos like this. But because this behavior is fully legal, the only way to really prevent it in the future is by making it as much of a PR nightmare as possible every time it happens. Maybe that way, at least, we could get Nintendo to go back to pretending we don't exist. Well, I can dream, anyway.